What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Other Guys on the Badlands Podcast Network. I'm Jake Chatsky, joined as always by Paul Kilgallen. And if my mic sounds awful, it's because I'm coming to you from the corner of a hotel room. Uh, I got Paul and I were talking. I know that no one can really see this, but they got like fucking Mardi Gras masks in the hotel room. They really got me wilding out and crazy setup. So I apologize profusely if my audio quality is shitty for this episode. We'll work on it next week. But Paul, how you doing? It's Super Bowl week and we got some Jets coaching stuff to talk about. How you feeling?
I'm jealous of you. I'm jealous that you're down there, but I am firm in the fact that I will never attend a Super Bowl until the Jets are in it. And then when they are, I will spare no expense and I'll probably take a month off of work, regardless of the outcome, because I'm going to need it. Um, but New Orleans is a fun city. You should have a good time down there this week. So have fun with your real job.
Thank you, man. It should be fun. I've had a lot of Jets Super Bowl thoughts in the last 3 years, being fortunate enough to get to like go to all these Super Bowl cities. And I cannot imagine any of these places just being overrun with gangrene. It would be a sight to see. I also I know Joe and Connor have had this thought about like going to the game versus like watching with the people you always watch Jets games
Yeah.
with and being able to be in your own setup if things don't go our way. And like, I just think it would be such a once in a lifetime experience. Granted, I feel like the tickets would be like 10 times the price that they are for even this matchup, which is insane. But I know Jets fans would do everything in their power to make sure that we had a home field advantage in a Super Bowl. So that would be a sight to behold.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely get the thought of like, hey, like let's keep it safe. Let's watch it with the people that you watch with, all that stuff. It all makes sense to me. At the end of the day, I'm like, how many chances do you get at this? Right? You just have to be in the building, just in case it goes our way. You have to be there for it. So I'll find my way there one way or the other, and I'll make sure that all the people that I normally watch with are there too.
But before we get into Jets niche specific coaching stuff, I saw this on the plane, and now that we're talking about this, I wanted to run it by you because I was sitting next to an Eagles fan who obviously their team recently won 2017, recently lost, so he has probably a different perspective on this. But I believe it was Jack Settleman who tweeted this, so shout out Jack. And the question was, uh, if I were to tell you that you were guaranteed a certain amount of money, but your team loses the Super Bowl, what is the amount of money where you would take that proposition? And so I looked at some follow ups in the comments. People don't know that like you sold your soul to the devil. So like no one,
Okay.
I mean, I think people would be able to figure it out, but no one knows that that's the exact transaction that took place, even if your life drastically changes. The other thing too is if you take no money, you're guaranteeing a win. So with that, like I still think everyone has a number and I've come up with my answer, but I wanted to pose it to you first. What is there any world in which you're taking this deal?
I agree with you in general that everything does have a price, and I was prepared to give you a price until you hit me with that last bit, which was if I take no money, I'm guaranteed a win, which is like I think I'm taking the win, dude. Like, and then maybe I'll playing chess here, like I'll bet my life savings on the Jets if I know they're going to win, and I didn't take any money.
Right. Yeah,
But no,
there's
I,
your
I
little
think
loophole.
look, if we were if we were a fan base that had a couple, even in recent history, like even if it was within my lifetime, even if it was when I was young, let's say it was 98 or it was 2009, I think I might be quicker to say like, yeah, I'll take the loss. We'll be back there sometime. But with the scarcity that we've even been to the playoffs, like I think I'm taking the sure thing. But I agree
So
with you. Everything does have a price.
I've thought about it because I was like, like a Jet Super Bowl is priceless. It's literally a priceless thing in my world. But you know, everything does have a number. And I thought about it, and I thought about it for a good long while, and I came up with this answer as I was reading through the question again just now. I would take, and it's not. It's kind of an abstract number. It's in the billions. Uh, I would take whatever amount of money would allow me to purchase the team from Woody Johnson, and
Ooh.
therefore like, yeah, they didn't win the Super Bowl, but maybe Woody's like, all right, we're peaking. This is my time to sell out. Buy the team from Woody and be able to build like an infrastructure and sustain success that we get back there again. That would be my pitch, is just like, yeah, you lose the one Super Bowl, but you get rid of the Johnson family, and that might be a bigger win. That was how I could justify it, and also a couple billion in the back pocket goes a long
Yeah,
way.
well, you need a couple billion for when eventually the entire fan base hates you.
Yes, for
So
sure.
you need something to cry on when that happens. But I like that we're both playing chess here.
Yeah, I think it's 6 moves ahead. All right, let's get into the Jets and the Jets staff now that we've had our Super Bowl fun. Uh, so the last time we spoke, obviously it was right after Glenn and Muji had been introduced at the press conference, and we had talked about, all right, that all eyes are how he builds out the staff. We talked about Tanner Engstrand a lot last episode, so if you want to hear our thoughts on that, go back and listen. But and also there's a full staff breakdown that's already been done on Badlands, so we're not going to go through piece by piece. But one thing we did talk about that I found really interesting last episode was you were in favor of hiring Steve Wilkes to the staff. You didn't necessarily want him to be DC as much as just a voice in the room. You've had a week to marinate on this take, and he has now been officially hired as the DC. What are your thoughts on that hire now?
Yeah, I think I'm okay with it. Joe said it in his pod. Like the one thing that I think was scaring me about him is the amount of places he's been and the duration with which he's at these places. So like it just makes you wonder if there's smoke, there's fire kind of thing with him. And so I wanted him around kind of to help with, hey, what did I do wrong in whether it be Arizona or San Francisco or the brief stint in San Francisco as a defensive coordinator, I meant, and then the brief stint as the Carolina interim, from a game management perspective. That said, like we didn't necessarily get that hire yet of like the assistant head coach who is a former head coach, whether it be Todd Haley as an offensive voice or like, so I think that hire still could come. And if it does, then I think I become more okay with Steve Wilkes being the defensive coordinator. I've also kind of talked myself to a place over the last week of like, it would be a little crazy for me to want so badly like what Aaron Glenn has and his connections and all that stuff, and then like pivot to being critical about the specific bodies that he's bringing in. Like at a certain point, it's like, okay, well, we got the guy at the top of the organization. He probably knows better than me, right? So like, why don't I just like ease up a little bit and trust that, Steve Wilkes
Trust the
calling the
process.
defensive plays is a good plan, right? I am happy that Glenn's not calling the plays. And I think that Wilkes probably will have some game management input with Glenn. But I think, again, if they do make that like one other hire that has kind of an amorphous title that's floating around as an assistant head coach that's not necessarily aligned with the unit and can help with game management, that would make me feel a lot more comfortable with Wilkes. But that's what I wanted him for in the first place.
Yeah, and I think Joe mentioned this as well, but like we all were clamoring for having someone with head coaching experience, albeit minimal, on the staff, and someone who could be sort of a guide for Glenn. And I think you put it perfectly, like tough to criticize the way in which he wants to do it, and maybe that was something where it's like doing a solid of like, I'm not going to come on board this staff and do you a solid unless like I'm keeping the same title and putting myself in a position that sets me up down the future. So I can understand why like the title and the responsibility is important to him as well. Um,
And also, like, the other
sorry,
thing
go
with
ahead.
Wilkes is I think it's impressive for Glenn to bring in a guy who's been an interim a few times, I think, and had that stint as a head coach because it's like it shows security in your own self, right? Like I'm not worried having a guy around that could step in seamlessly if I were to get fired, right? So he has no concern about those voices being behind him and like needing to be the biggest kind of star or personality in the room, which I think is a good sign. And also like let's be honest, Wilkes got a pretty raw deal in Arizona. Like they drafted the worst quarterback in that draft. He was out of the league within 2 years, I think. Um, they notoriously tweeted Josh is our guy and then drafted Kyler Murray 10 seconds later after they fired him and hired a different coach. And then like in Carolina, that was a bad situation with a bad owner and a bad previous head coach that he was stepping in for too. And he didn't do too bad of a job there. So I think Wilkes will probably be a really good resource for Glenn in the sense of I was in two pretty difficult situations. So New York is going to be a difficult situation at some point, even if everything goes really well. Like it's going to get loud and annoying here for Glenn at some point. And Wilkes is going to kind of be able to be like, hey, I've been there before. Like we can, at a minimum, right? Even if he's not kind of directing him on what to do, he can be just a guy to sit in Glenn's office and be like, yeah, dude, I get it. I've been there, right? And that can be really helpful for Glenn. Sorry to cut you off.
No, all good. So as we look down the list of like the full staff that is being built out, was there anyone who like caught your eye or jumped off the page as like a really interesting hire that you were surprised to see? Because for me, that person was Scott Turner, who, one of the faults that people, or, one of the dings on Tanner Engstrand was like, he's never called plays. Well, now you have a guy on the staff who has called plays for two different organizations, and albeit was very handcuffed by the offense in Las Vegas this past year, but like was a pretty well-respected guy. Obviously he has like the Hall of Fame, or, the NFL family lineage with his dad. And, I think he's like a really good add to a staff that people are criticizing somewhat for their experience level. And I think, having a young offensive mind in the building who has like shown some chops as an offensive play caller is a great add, albeit in a lesser role. Was there anyone who like jumped off the page to you?
Is Scott Norv's kid?
Yeah.
Huh. That's interesting. Well, I'd rather have a Turner than a Schottenheimer, I guess.
Sure. I mean, we're all chasing a Shanahan, so
yeah, exactly.
Going after as well deserving as it can be, nepo baby after nepo baby.
So, the one everybody was losing their minds over was Charles London. And I kind of fall back to what I just said about Wilkes. Like it's a little, I don't know if it's fair to say, hey, I trust Aaron Glenn. I'm so happy we hired him, and then like lose your mind over a positional coach. At the end of the day, all of those positional coaches are going to take on the identity of the head coach and the organization and the way it filters down. And I think you can kind of prove that point by looking at when a position coach gets hired into a coordinator role, or a coordinator gets hired into a head coaching role, and they don't necessarily have the same amount of success that they had in a better organization with better leadership. It's not necessarily because they were that much better or worse at that specific job. It's because they were kind of feeding off of the energy that was being, pushed down from the top of the organization. And so like, I think regardless of some of these guys' history, like you get the right room together and you get the right kind of vibes going, and like everybody, it's more of a sum of the parts than it is, or it's more of a whole than it is like a sum of the parts thing. So I hesitate to like get too worried about, especially somebody as far down as a position coach. And we don't even know who the quarterback is at this point, right? Like we don't even know if it's a developmental project or if it's going to be a veteran thing, or if it's going to be a bridge type situation or like a rookie. Like we have no compass for where the quarterback thing is going. So I wasn't as bent out of shape about that one as everybody else seemed to be. Chris Harris is the name that like grabbed me when I saw it. And I was like, Chris Harris, like the same Chris Harris that was a DB, like in my lifetime, not that long ago. And then I looked at a picture of him. I think he's put on a couple LBs in the last couple of years, because he does not look like the same Chris Harris, but it is indeed the same Chris Harris. And so I think the thing, when you're asking me that question, like which one jumped out to you, that was the name that jumped out. But I think when I look at the total picture, I'm really happy about the amount of former players that are kind of in this stratosphere at this point. Like they're going to have an insane amount of credibility with everybody in the locker room because half of them have been there before. And some of them pretty recently, right? And a lot of them at a pretty high level. Like Chris Harris was a good DB. Aaron Glenn was a Pro Bowl defensive back. So I think that there's going to be a lot of legitimacy around that coaching staff. Chris Banjo is another one that like, hey, he was a good special teamer for a number of years, right? And then he was coaching under a pretty good special teams coach. So I think I was really, really enthused about the experience that's coming in there of playing, right? And I'm okay with youth as long as there's some legitimacy behind it. And I think that you can definitely say with this group of coaches, there's a lot of like playing legitimacy there that makes it worth taking the chance on younger guys and being like, why not us? Like, why can't we catch lightning in the bottle with the next great group of coaches? And like, why can't this tree be something? So I'm happy with what I would call like the theme or the motif of where this coaching staff is going.
Yeah, great points all around. And I would also say too, one of the things that